They say the soil remembers. It drinks what we spill and never forgets. And somewhere, beneath this field, beneath the quiet hum of wind and grass, the earth still trembles with her name. The horses move first. 4 beasts of muscle and terror, their eyes glassy with obedience, their reins pulled tight by trembling hands. The sound is deafening, hooves slamming against the ground like thunder made of bone. A woman's cry cuts through it. Not sharp, not pleading, and just steady. She does not beg. She does not bow. Even as the ropes bite into her wrists, even as her body drags across gravel and soil, she holds her head high, chin to the wind, eyes open to the storm. The overseer rides behind, his mouth twisted with the confidence of power. He thinks this will break her. He thinks the world will learn obedience from her. Pain, but the land disagrees. The field groans beneath the weight of her defiance. The sky dims, as if it too cannot bear to watch. For 2 miles, her body is dragged through dust, thorns, and stone, a trail of blood marking the line between silence and revolt. Children watch from the corners of shacks, their small hands clutching wood, their eyes wide with the first lesson of resistance. What it costs. When the horses finally stop, she lies still. But the air is alive. The overseer dismounts, breathing heavy, waiting for the stillness to mean victory. It doesn't, because the silence that follows is not surrender. It's the silence before a haunting, before a memory begins to breathe, before a spirit refuses to rest. Her blood soaks into the soil, turning the field dark and holy. The wind whispers, soft, trembling, alive, and the name they tried to bury begins to rise again. Tonight, the fireflies gather where she fell. They flicker like tiny souls, guarding the scar her body left behind. And though her voice is gone, the ground hums with her refusal, the rhythm of her name beating through the roots. They call this place the Field of Freedom now, but it was born from her. Scream from her silence, from her vow. She refused to bow, and even now, first she still doesn't. Morning starts before light, before the roosters cry, before the dew loosens its grip on the leaves. She wakes in the dark, because darkness is safer than what daylight brings. In the cabins, the air smells of iron and sweat, a mix of ash from the fire pit and damp wood from last night's rain. She rises slow, silent, careful not to wake the others. The boards creak beneath her bare feet like they, too, ache to rest. Her name is Ilara, though the master never uses it. To him, she's just girl. To the others, she's the whisper before prayer. They know her by the stillness in her movements, the way she looks past the horizon, like she can already see freedom waiting there. Outside, the fields stretch endless, acres of green and dust where the sun punishes the skin and time forgets mercy. Rows upon rows of cotton bloom like ghosts, soft and cruel all at once. The overseer's whip hangs from his belt like a snake asleep, but everyone knows it wakes easy. One wrong breath, 1 second too slow, and the air cracks open. Ilara walks into the field with a sack slung across her shoulder, its rough edges rubbing against her skin until it burns. The cotton tears at her fingers, tiny cuts that never heal, always reopening like old wounds, remembering their purpose. The world hums with the rhythm of labor, boots crunching soil, chains clinking faintly, a distant cough swallowed by the wind. Above it all, a single bird cries out, a crow perched on the fence post, black against the blue dawn. Ilara looks at it and almost smiles. The crow never bows. The crow never stays chained. She works, hour after hour, until the world blurs into heat and heartbeat. The overseer passes, his shadow long, his voice sharp. He says nothing to her, perhaps because he feels the quiet fury beneath her calm. She has a way of holding silence like a weapon. When she looks at him, her eyes are still, and something in that stillness unnerves him. At night, they gather by the dying fire. Old men hum songs they can't remember learning, songs their grandmothers hummed when chains were new. Voices low, trembling, beautiful in their brokenness. Ilara listens, her head bowed slightly, not in submission, but in reverence. The songs remind her that pain is not the end, and it's the proof that the soul still fights, That memory still burns even when the tongue dares not speak. Sometimes the preacher visits, an old man with eyes gone grey from too much seeing. He tells them about Moses, about walls of water and a voice from the sky. He tells them that freedom is coming, that every chain has its rust. Elara listens, but she doesn't look to the heavens. Her eyes stay fixed on the ground, on the soil that drinks sweat and blood alike, because she believes freedom won't fall from the sky. It will rise from the earth. When the others sleep, she steps outside the cabin. The moon paints everything in shades of silver and sorrow. The wind moves through the fields, and she swears she can hear the land breathing. She touches the dirt, feels the pulse beneath it. Slow, steady, alive. The soil hums back, as if recognizing her touch. Maybe it knows, maybe it's waiting for her too. Each night she whispers a vow, not in words but in will. I will not break. She repeats it like a prayer with no sound. Like a drumbeat in her chest, I will not break. The overseer doesn't see it, but the land does, the fire does. Even the stars seem to burn lower when she speaks to them. In this place where the sun burns too bright and the cruelty feels endless, her defiance is a small impossible flame, a single light that refuses to go out. Morning returns again, and with it the same aching routine, but every time she stands taller. Every time she bends less. The others begin to notice. A spark moves through the cabins like a whisper, a reminder that there are hearts still awake. The overseer senses it. Too, he can't name it, but he feels it in his bones. The quiet rebellion in her silence, a shadow forming. On the edge of his control, something ancient stirring beneath the field he thought he owned. The world keeps turning. The cotton keeps growing, but the soil beneath begins to shift. Somewhere deep below the roots, the earth remembers every name that ever refused to bow. And Elara, she's about to give it another. Before she was defiant, she was small. Before she was Elara, she was her mother's echo, a thin child with eyes too wide for the world she was born into. Her first lullaby wasn't a song, it was the clatter of chains. Her first sunrise came through cracks in the wood, light filtered and faint, as if even the sun was careful not to look too closely at their suffering. Her mother's hands were strong, not from freedom, but from survival. They smelled of soap and ash, skin hardened by scrubbing the master's floors until her knuckles bled. Yet when she touched Elara's face, her palms felt soft, like she saved her last bit of tenderness for her child. She'd hum when the nights grew long, low and trembling, a melody shaped like morning. Elara remembers that hum, even now. It drifts somewhere between her heartbeat and the wind. It's the sound that carried her through the worst of it and the night her mother disappeared. They said she stole bread, but Elara knows the truth. Her mother had fed a runaway. Boy no older than 12, trembling in the barn, eyes wide with fear. She gave him bread, water, a prayer, and for that, she was taken at dawn. Elara never saw her again. Only the blood on the porch, only the rope still swinging, moving in rhythm with the morning. Breeze. Something broke inside her that day, but it wasn't her spirit. It was her silence, the kind of silence that stops being fear and becomes armor, a stillness so heavy it turns into strength. For years after, she worked beneath the same overseer who ordered her mother's punishment. Every time he passed, her breath slowed, her hands tightened around the cotton stalks, but she never looked away. Her eyes followed him, calm, calculating, unyielding. He called her mute. He thought it was weakness. But silence, in her world, was sharper than any blade. In the winters, when the nights turned longer than the pain, she'd lie awake and talk to the dark. Not with words, but with memory. She'd see her mother's hands. The way they worked, the way they trembled, the way they fought to stay gentle in a place built to crush softness. And she'd swear over and over, I won't let them win. Not the way they think they can. There were others like her, ghosts of women who endured too much, who carried bruises like tattoos of survival. They'd gather sometimes by the river, washing clothes under the moonlight. They didn't speak much, but in their glances there was communion, a secret language of pain and persistence. Each motion of their hands said, "We remember." Each drop of water falling back into the river said, "We endure that river, cold silver." Endless it became her church. When she touched it, she imagined it washing away the names they'd given her, the lies they'd forced upon her body. She'd close her eyes and let the current pull at her wrists, pretending for a moment that it was freedom tugging her. Home. But home was a word she didn't have. Only soil. Only sky. Only the faint hum of something sacred beneath, both. The years carved her quiet into a weapon. Each scar, each bruise, each act of cruelty layered her resolve. She learned that rage could be patient, that fire didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited, slow and steady, beneath the ashes. The overseer never noticed how her silence grew, heavier, how her stillness stopped being fear, how her gaze stopped darting away. He mistook her calm for surrender. And that mistake and that blindness would one day cost him everything. Because every time he struck her, she memorized the sound of the whip, the rhythm of cruelty, and deep inside, she matched it to another rhythm, the one her mother hummed before she vanished, a song buried beneath agony, now rising in secret. Pain had become melody, suffering had become prophecy, and by the time Ilara reached womanhood, her silence had shape, it had will, it had teeth. No sermon gave it to her, no preacher blessed it. It was born from the rope that took her mother, from the blood that stained the porch, from the wind that refused to let the rope hang still. That was the beginning of the haunting. Not after death, but long before it. Because some spirits are made, not freed, and Ilara's was already learning how to live beyond the flesh. There are moments when Ilara feels the world slow, when the air turns thick, and the sound of her own breath feels louder than everything else. It happens mostly in the fields, when the overseer's back is turned, and the wind shifts just right. That's when she feels it. Something moving beneath her ribs, something not entirely human. A rhythm, deep and steady, like the earth itself is breathing through her. At first, she thinks it's madness, the way her chest tightens, the way her hands tremble not from fear, but from restraint. But then she notices patterns, the strange order inside the chaos, the way pain moves in cycles, the way cruelty repeats, and the way her silence holds it all together, turning anguish into understanding. The rope that binds her wrists every day when punishment comes, it's not just a weapon anymore. It's a reminder, a lesson. She studies it, its texture, its burn. Each fiber a strand of power, twisted, coiled, controlled. But she sees what they don't. A rope can bind, but a rope can also break. And when it breaks, it never returns to what it was. She begins to look at everything that way. The whip, a serpent, sharp, proud, afraid of silence. The key on the overseer's belt and shining in sunlight like a cruel promise. The soil, dark, damp, pulsing with every drop of blood it drinks. All of it means something now, all of it speaks. At night, she starts whispering to the ground. Not with words, but with heartbeat. She presses her palm into the dirt and listens. The soil hums back, faint but real. It knows her name, it has always known. There's a dream that visits her often. She stands in the field at dawn, alone, barefoot, surrounded by fog. The horses wait in the distance, their breath steaming in the cold morning air. But when she walks toward them, they bow their heads. The rope lies coiled on the ground, useless. The overseer is gone, and the air tastes like rain. When she wakes, her hands are shaking, her heartbeat wild but steady, like the dream isn't prophecy, but memory from a life that hasn't happened yet. The others don't see it. This transformation, quiet and patient, but they feel it. They speak softer when she's near. Even the children stop their play when she walks past, as if her silence asks for reverence. Something in her energy changes the air, thickens it, slows it, makes it heavy with meaning. Sometimes, the preacher's words echo in her mind. Freedom begins when you believe you deserve it. But she doesn't believe in words anymore. She believes in the stillness between them, in that moment when the mouth closes and the world must listen. Her silence grows louder each day. It fills the cracks between the songs. Now the prayers, the screams, it becomes its own sound, a low hum of resistance. The overseer feels it. Though he can't explain it, he starts to dream of her, standing, unbroken, her eyes fixed on him. In his nightmares, her silence drowns out the sound of his whip. He wakes sweating, handshaking, as if he's already met his judgment. Elara doesn't know this yet, but her spirit has already begun to move beyond her body. It slips through walls, drifts through the roots of the cotton, whispers to the wind. Each night, the air hums her vow, I will not bow, I will not break, and the land listens. It gathers her strength, stores it deep in the soil, so that when the day comes, when the rope burns her skin for the last time, the earth will rise with her, because rebellion doesn't start in fire, it starts in silence, and Elara's silence is almost ready to burn. Night carried no stars that evening, only smoke, and the echo of boots against hollow wood. She had just finished whispering a hymn to her little sister, something about tomorrow, about how morning always comes. When the door splintered open, 3 men, drunk on the privilege of power, lanterns swinging like ghosts in their hands, the light trembled across her face, and for a moment, she looked like someone carved from flame and sorrow. Name? One of them barked. He didn't ask like a question, he asked like a warning. She stood, bare feet on cold earth, her back straight as a spear. Sarah, she said, her voice steady, unflinching, the kind of calm that makes cowards nervous. The whip cracked against the floorboards, dust rose like incense. He wanted fear. He wanted the trembling, but she gave him nothing. Behind her, her sister whimpered, a child of barely 12, and Sarah turned her head, just slightly enough to murmur, "Don't let them see your tears." That made him angry. Anger, the kind that grows from not being worshipped. He struck her once, across the face. Blood bloomed red and proud against her cheek. Still, she didn't move. The overseer, a tall man with a limp and a scar running across his lip, watched her like a man watching a storm he can't contain. He'd seen hundreds beg, hundreds crumble before the first blow. But this one's silence felt like prophecy. They tied her wrists, dragged her outside. The moon hid behind clouds, ashamed. Around the yard the others gathered, slaves and masters alike, a congregation of power and pity. They accused her of teaching rebellion, of whispering freedom into the ears of children, of saying, "We were not born for chains." And the truth? She had, because someone had to. The preacher's boy, just 16, spat at her feet, a cruel little echo of his father's sermons. She looked down at the spit, then at him and smiled. Not forgiveness, not defiance, something heavier, and the quiet understanding that he was born blind, and would die blind too. The overseer ordered the horses, 4 of them, black and restless, snorting clouds into the night air. Sarah closed her eyes. She could feel the rhythm of their hearts. Wild, scared, alive, just like hers. They tied her to them, each limb bound to a beast, each rope a line between flesh and fury. Her sister screamed, a sound so sharp it cracked the dark open. Sarah looked back one last time, searching for that small face in the crowd. She found it, pale, trembling, wide-eyed, and she smiled again, soft, almost peaceful. "Don't forget me," she said. Then to the men, "You can break my bones, but not my will." The overseer raised his arm. The horses reared. Thunder, dirt exploding, the scream of rope tightening. Then motion. They dragged her across the yard, through the path that cut across the cotton fields. The men followed on horseback, their laughter rising over the sound of hooves. Every turn of the wheel, every kick of dirt, wrote her name deeper into the land. By the first mile, her dress was torn to threads. By the second, her body was streaked with blood and dust. By the third, the laughter had stopped. Because something was wrong, she should have been silent, but she wasn't. She was singing, her voice cracked, faint, broken. But still, it was there, a hymn from her mother's memory, one they used to hum in the fields, the one that said, "No chain can hold a soul that knows the way home." The men looked at each other, uneasy now, because how do you kill someone who's already free? When it was over, the overseer dismounted, sweat mixing with shame. She was still, but her eyes half open, still fixed on the horizon. A storm rolled in, lightning split the sky, and the first drops of rain fell heavy upon her blood. The overseer turned away, but the thunder spoke for her. It sounded like her name over and over again. The morning after her death, the field was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind seemed afraid to speak. The horses that had dragged her refused to eat. They stood in the corner of the pen, trembling, their eyes wild with something not quite fear, something closer to recognition. They say when the overseer went to wash his hands, the water turned pink, and no matter how long he scrubbed, the stain clung like guilt does to a man's soul. He never slept easy again. Not one night. Because every night, the same sound. Hooves, echoing outside his cabin, a woman's breath between the thunder, and a whisper that crawled through the cracks in the wood. You can break my bones, but not my will. By the end of the week, the workers began to speak in hushed tones. The cotton wouldn't grow right. The soil stayed wet even when the sky was dry, and dogs refused to cross that path, the 2-mile scar carved by her blood. The old preacher tried to bless it. He came with oil, a cross, and a trembling voice, but when he raised his hand to pray, the wind snatched the words away, scattering them like ashes. He dropped his Bible that day, said the pages burned his skin. At night, the shacks whispered with stories. They said her shadow walked the fields, barefoot and bright, her chains dragging behind her like silver snakes, that she wasn't seeking revenge. She was counting souls, looking for the ones who'd forgotten her, the ones still bowing. The overseer moved away that winter, took his family, his money, his fear, but he couldn't leave the sound. It followed him across rivers and towns, a woman humming a field song no one had ever taught her. He died muttering her name. The doctor said his heart simply stopped, but those who knew said she called him home. Years passed. The field grew wild, untamed grass swallowing the last traces of her suffering. Until one spring morning, a group of children found flowers blooming where her blood once fell. Not white, not yellow, but deep crimson, petals soft as silk, as if the earth had finally decided to remember her beautifully. The elders called them freedom blooms. Every harvest, they left them untouched, because every time someone tried to pluck one, the sky would darken and the wind would whisper, "Don't." By then, her name had spread from cabin to cabin, song to song. They called her the girl who refused to bow. Some said she had been an angel in disguise. Others said she was sent by the ancestors, a flame that couldn't be drowned. But everyone agreed on one thing: her spirit was not gone. It had simply changed form. On stormy nights, they say you can still hear the sound of hooves racing across the plain. But there are no riders, only wind and thunder, and the faint glow of something running free. And sometimes, just sometimes, a traveler passing through the field of freedom will hear singing. A woman's voice, soft as the rain, carrying the same hymn she sang as she died. It goes like this. No chain can hold a soul that knows the way home. No lash can strike the heart already gone. The earth may drink my body, but my name will never bow. By the turn of the century, her grave was nothing more than an unmarked mound beneath an oak tree. But the locals still brought offerings, a piece of bread, a string of beads, a handful of soil from their own fields. And when freedom finally came, when chains began to break and laws began to fall, they said her name again, loudly this time, without fear. They built a small wooden cross near the path. Painted on it, in crude letters, were 5 words: "She taught the earth to speak." And every year since, when the sun sets red over the field of freedom, and the wind hums low through the grass, the world remembers her. The girl who refused to bow, the woman who taught even the soil to rise, the spirit who turned pain into legend. Her story was not buried, it was planted, and it grows still. 100 years pass, the road changes, the plantations rot, the world forgets the sound of chains, but not the earth. Never the earth. Children now run where she once bled. Their laughter cuts through the same wind that once carried her screams. They don't know her. Name, not yet, but their joy, their freedom is written in her blood. The field is called something else now, that's Freedom Hill. Tourist plaque tells a different story. A softer one, dates, names, numbers, the language of history, not of pain. But the locals still know. They whisper to newcomers, don't walk there alone after dark. If you listen too close, the past might listen back. Every October, the wind turns strange. It hums through the tall grass, the same rhythm as a heart refusing to surrender. And on the anniversary of her death, a single red bloom still rises, no matter the season. It faces west toward the horizon she was dragged into, as if it still waits for her to return. One day, a young girl finds it. She kneels by the bloom, touches its petals. The wind stills. The ground feels warm. She doesn't know why she starts to cry. But somewhere in the soil, something remembers her touch. She takes the flower home, presses it between the pages of her notebook. And that night, she dreams of hooves, of chains, of a voice whispering, never bow. When she wakes, she writes a poem, just a few lines, short, rhythmic. Alive, they dragged her far. The earth dragged them farther. She bent, but she did not break. And now the wind speaks her name. Her teacher reads it, publishes it. Soon, the town remembers, then the state, then the nation. The lost name rises again, the girl who refused to bow. Scholars search for her story, find fragments in archives, letters half burned, testimonies buried under silence. Piece by piece, they rebuild her, a ghost given flesh by memory. And somewhere, in the night wind, she smiles, because this is what she fought for, not vengeance, but remembrance, not pain, but legacy. Her story becomes a song again, sung by children who will never wear chains. In classrooms and museums, her face appears cast drawn from words, not from photographs, her spirit painted in sepia and light. Every retelling carries the same refrain, dragged by horses, but still the film ends as it began, with silence. Only the wind, only the field, only the faint echo of a woman's breath, and then softly the sound of hooves, not of death, but of freedom, running wild across the open plains, chasing the horizon she once dreamed of. She does not haunt anymore, and she guides. Every storm that passes that land carries her rhythm. Every gust of wind speaks her. The world has changed, but her defiance still blooms in its soil. Because some spirits don't fade, they root, they rise, they return again and again, until freedom itself learns her. Temeratava, the girl who refused her, thou was dragged for 2 miles, buried by time, but alive and forever and in the field of freedom.